I am Kathleen Rhodes. I teach in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies at ODU. And I'm the Director of Gay Cultural Studies, which means that a lot of the work that I do is in teaching our queer studies classes. We have a queer studies minor at ODU and supporting the work of people who are doing LGBTQ research and coursework at ODU.
I'm Dr. Danielle Stern, a professor of communication at Christopher Newport University, and I'm also affiliate faculty for the minor program in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies.
Hi, my name is Todd Murphy. I am a teacher, and I have lived in Norfolk for 18 years.
Bert McManus. I'm 56, and
the date is
April the 8th, 2019.
Hi, my name is Marie Cartier, and I am in Norfolk, Virginia at the Hershee Bar. It is October 18th, 2018, and I am here interviewing Annette Stone, the owner and founder of this establishment, Hershee Bar, Hershee. It's been open since 1983. And it's 2018, so that's 35 years.
Media is uniquely powerful in the spread of information because our knowledge of the world beyond our immediate surroundings comes directly from media. Queer bars and queer spaces alike were really important for queer people to be able to actually see themselves represented because the media wasn't representing them. Images of sexuality are largely constructed by film text, so it's really important that media representation is accurate and fair, but at the time it wasn't, which is why queer people went into public spaces in order to find representation and community because the media was lacking what they needed.
So, although I should not have been going to any bars, let alone gay bars, when I was 17 and 18 years old, back in St. Louis and questioning, not knowing I was questioning at the time,
Sure.
We had an area in St. Louis called the Complex that was a few different gay, queer affirming bars in kind of midtown area of St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And so my friends and I, we were juniors and seniors in high school, just kind of trying stuff out. When I look back now, I should have known all three of us are queer, but at the time,
yeah.
only the boy, I say boy because we were 16, 17
Yeah.
years old when he came out.
Yeah.
It was a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but more accessible and affirming for him to be able to come out.
Yeah.
It was just different. And we're going back to the 90s.
Absolutely.
And since he had recently had his own coming out experience and was wanting to meet other young men, and we were along for the ride and wanted to support him, we're like, yeah, we'll go check out these bars. But we'd have to go early.
Yeah.
Back in the day when you could go in at like 6 or 7, have a Diet Coke and a burger, and then you just wait.
Until like it's
Yes.
like 21 and
And I want to be very clear as an educator, I am not supporting or condoning
Of course.
underage drinking, right? But but it's
do what you have to do.
but it's about the space,
Yeah,
right? To be able to get into the space because they would card, right?
Absolutely.
So it's about like, so going in when we were younger before 7 because they would card after like 9 or something like that.
Definitely, yeah.
And it felt so freeing.
Yeah.
It felt very different when I look back on it now of going to bars when I got a little bit older. I actually, was 21
Of
and able
age,
to go
yeah.
out. And, the ways that in those, I guess, more mainstream bars, not queer-centered bars,
Yeah.
guys would always come up and try and dance on me uninvited.
Yeah.
It was never women. It was always this kind of, like the things I just taught about this morning to my intersectionality class, like rape culture and women seen as objects. And I think those kind of heteronormative straight spaces.
Yeah.
There is that sense of entitlement over women's bodies or any bodies with more vulnerability.
That's such a good word.
And that didn't happen in the gay bars when I was younger. Now, to be clear, when I was older and going to those spaces, it would have been nice if a woman would have like caught my eye or whatever. That would have been consensual.
Yeah.
But this idea of consent culture, at least for me as a younger person, learning my way in a queer affirming space, it meant so much to me, particularly when I was younger.
Yeah.
So important for youth, particularly at a time where we didn't have as much media representation.
Absolutely.
Talking about the 90s, and back then it was either AIDS stories or coming out stories that affirmed queers as straight, or excuse me, queers as safe for straight people.
Right.
So I had to go out into communities to see people that were like my friends and like eventually myself, I realized.
Absolutely.
Images of sexuality are largely constructed by film text, so it's really important that media representation is accurate and fair, but at the time it wasn't, which is why queer people went into public spaces in order to find representation and community because the media was lacking what they needed. The queer community was particularly vulnerable to media stereotyping, and a lot of the pervasive invisibility and attacks on the queer community were due to media representation, which led to negative societal attitudes, and it led to queer people needing to find space in public spaces.
It's really important for people to have ways to see themselves, like reflected back. And gay bars have been that for queer people in general since the very beginning, like a way to, and in a public place, see other people that you have some kind of experience in common with. And so the sense of community is just, I am not the only one here. I see other people who, some of them might look like me, some of them might not look like me, but there's some kind of feeling like I have something in common with these people, and they understand something about this shared experience that we have, even though we might have lots of other differences.
It's important that we talk about the media even when discussing places that are physical, because the physical spaces needed to exist because of the lack of media representation due to the production code and post-production code era, where the production code was still impacting a lot of our media. The production code sought to police and regulate on-screen sexuality, which included the eradication of homosexuality, which led to the limitation of queer people in media. And the code determined not only what could be shown on screen, but also created a set formula of screening moral, social, and political subjects, meaning that it created the notion that queer people were bad. Every detail was subjected to production code scrutiny, and homosexuals were either entirely erased from Hollywood films, or producers and writers had to use visual gender codes to construct homosexuals, which generally consisted of making female characters very masculine and male characters very feminine, which also became known as the pansy character. So images of effeminate men or mannish women became the main method of representing homosexuality in America, which was not accurately representing the queer community at the time. And the stereotypical depiction of lesbians and gay men as abnormal and the suppression of positive or even normal representation served to maintain and police the boundaries of moral order, showing that queer people are bad. But gay people worked to combat the production code. The gay and lesbian liberation movement of the 1970s had a particular investment in combating misrepresentation of LGBT experience in popular media. Activists held the mass media and popular culture responsible for promoting negative stereotypes about homosexuality, which led to erasure and marginalization of queer groups. Gay people also combated the production code by creating their own private media, including visual media and newspapers like Norfolk's local gay paper, Our Own. Our Own features stories, resources, and events for and about gay people. It gave the opportunity for gay people to meet each other. I saw many ads for roommates, friends, and romantic connections in the paper. And bars like Hershee Bar used to advertise using Our Own.
Essentially, capitalism allows for free laborers in the sense that we have the freedom to look for jobs, but also the freedom to sell our labor powers for wages. Capitalism not only transformed economics, but some authors find that it also transformed the nuclear family structure and the entire idea of heterosexual relationships.
There were lots of things that Annette did. So Annette was the owner of Hershee Bar, Annette Stone, and she very intentionally created community in several ways. So the thing that comes to mind for me, first and foremost, are her Thanksgiving dinners.
We realized that we had a lot of guests that were in the military, young girls. Mostly at that time, our whole clientele was female. And we realized that they had nowhere to go. They had no family to be with. And we
didn't intend to do Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, but we had to do it. We knew that they would not have that experience, and that a lot of the girls could not go home. They weren't allowed, or they weren't welcome. And we heard that, and we really saw the need to do that, and it was okay with us. I invited my parents here.
And everybody deserves to be with family, whatever that family unit is. And I think this has kind of fallen out of fashion, but we used to use the word a lot more in gay spaces in the 90s and early 2000s, the word family, to indicate like other gay people.
Do you feel like these kind of spaces that have the ability to create an alternate family, is that important to the gay community in your mind?
Oh, it's so important to us. When I wasn't at a bar or a gay bar, I was longing to be at a bar or gay bar. The first time I walked into a bar, it was the Q Club. I was 15. I had my brother's ID, and the music was blaring, and the lights were bright and shiny, and there was a man in a dress. The first time I'd ever seen a man in a dress on the dance floor, and I said to myself, I'm home. And I felt that sense of connection that I'd never felt before, and I wanted to recreate it.
So, when individuals started making a living from wages, the family structure shifted away from the independent family unit, resulting in the ability to sustain personal identities, oftentimes queer identities. Queer people began to sustain a group life, with gay bars opening up, drag balls, public bathhouses, literary societies, and private social clubs. Especially in big cities, queer people would gather publicly in the streets. In the 70s, thousands of individuals came out and joined the rising movement with a growing sense of community.
So let's go back to 1983. Why did you, and you started here,
Right.
this place. Okay, how come?
Well, I met my friend Bill, and I told him that I always wanted a woman's bar. And there were a few in the area at the time, but I did not think that they were giving the girls what I felt they needed. So I wanted to facilitate that.
We didn't have too many fights in our bar. It was mostly just dancing. Everybody just, there were girl shows we had a lot, which was a typical Sunday night deal. And the girls, now it's just drag queens and stuff, but before the softball girls and everybody, they put on a show almost every Sunday. And it'd be packed.
You should have seen all of the softball trophies that Annette had in that bar. There was
Aw.
like an entire
That is so
wall.
cool.
And then there were softball trophies actually just stashed everywhere in there. And the softball players came and spent a lot of time in that bar. And so they built their community with the team, but then they would also come to the bar.
I'm sure you're aware of the closure of so many lesbian bars across the United States. So what did you do specifically to make this place different? Like, those were your desires? What happened here that was different than the other places you've been to?
I think our staff, the family, the bond that we created with our staff and our clientele. And, Billy was here every single day. I was here every single night. We hired people that, some of them are still with us, some have passed away or moved away, but they didn't leave on bad terms. Everyone that was here that worked for us was very happy to be with us. And even our guests, a lot of military was here, and they moved away, but they left the area, but they never left the bar.
Some of the people have been with you since the very beginning, and they're still here?
Oh, we have a bartender named Bert, and she's been here for 34 years.
The last one I can remember was like a G6, whatever. And they entertained the heck out of us. They really practiced their number. And they were all over the bar. And then they would get up and do their part all around. And people would be just standing up. I mean, even back in the day, Madonna was real popular in City of London. They'd be rolling all over the floor, and the girls would just be standing around handing out their dollar bills to their favorite, entertainer or whoever they want, they liked. So it was was great. It was a very close family type environment. And, I don't know, a giant sorority of lesbians, I guess.
Well, for me personally, it helped me know that if I were to move to Norfolk, which I eventually did, that I would have a space that I felt included. And inclusion is so important, right? It's that sense of belonging.
Right.
And I know for others, it was so much more. Because I am somebody who overwhelmingly, the majority of my adulthood, benefits from straight privilege in the way that I just embody femininity at times.
Sure.
But what I miss out on if I don't go to queer affirming spaces and queer centered spaces after a while, I feel that disconnect.
Absolutely.
So I know that there's other people that rely on spaces like Hershee Bar and queer-centered spaces so much more because they might be more visibly different or have have been cut off from their family, friend, or faith groups and need something, where I've been more fortunate in most aspects of my life for that.
Lesbian bars, in particular, served as spaces where women could express their identities free from discrimination. Living in a society that serves the patriarchy, these women could get away from the hegemonic ideals of love, marriage, and virginity, and instead gain autonomy through this shared space.
Certainly, I think that lesbian bars have created spaces for lesbians and queer women in a world that is still full of misogyny and sexism. And that is not something that, it's not like you show up in gay spaces and there's no longer any sexism, right? Sometimes you can experience that even more in gay spaces than you can in non-gay spaces.
Right.
And so for me, and I think for some other lesbians, it's been nice to have those kinds of places where you could go and think, okay, so there's another shared experience. It's not just the queer experience that's shared, but also as a queer woman, there's that shared experience. Because, even within the community, we have those differences.
Queer bars also served as places of solidarity, standing for resistance. Queer bars have always faced tensions, especially from police surveillance and gentrification, resulting in the closing of bars, relocation, or very limited access to these spaces, which is why advocacy is so important.
I feel like this area is a working class area. I would say that some people consider it a crime area or something like that, but I don't. I believe that it's like a couple steps above that. Mostly working class families, retirees, quiet sort of neighborhood.
It was awesome. I mean, you walked inside, there was like a pool table, then the bar, and there's some chairs and the big dance floor up front, and packed with women. All kinds of women, big dykey women. I mean, not so many films that came out later, but there were. I mean, we were a good mixed match, and barflies. It was just wonderful. It was just packed of, oh my God, lots of military, and it was just a really great environment.
I didn't know it was in the area. I used to jog by that corner all the time. So I was familiar with it. I've never been, or I had never been. I must have read about it in the news from time to time. But I really remember when they were buying when the city was taking over those properties, and that the bar was going to be removed. I remember that process.
Do you have any theories on why Hershee Bar closed? Do you know why? Do you know the impact that had on the community?
Well, I know the public narrative because I've been a Norfolk resident since 2009. I was one of many people that showed up to Norfolk City Council, and I spoke on one of the occasions in early February 2018, I believe it was. As a Norfolk resident, I would see the City Council agenda, I would read the news about it, and I was a part of this group who would go and speak. Again, not the person who spearheaded it, but what benefited from that. And the public narrative was, okay, Annette Stone, who had ran the bar for nearly 40 years, unfortunately, due to very high rents in cities like Norfolk and other cities, she didn't own the building, but she leased it. And without any notification, whatever company, I don't know if it was a company or a family,
Yeah.
but probably a company, I think, from what I recall in the stories, in the news stories, the company was struggling to make money, right? We live in capitalism, right? Even though we're talking about inclusivity and belonging, it's still, we have to rely on capitalism, and the rent is too damn high, as they say. And so that company wanted to make some money, and so they took a deal from the city.
My understanding is that the city was buying properties and planning to tear them down and to build something, that looked better. Certainly the properties in that area did not look new. I mean, they looked run down at times. I don't know if Hershey's particularly looked run down, but the whole shopping area was sort of not an attraction. And I think I think at one point they were talking about doing a farmer's market in the Sewell's Point area, at 5 Points. Like they had some ideas to try to make that corridor more attractive. And I think historically it had been more attractive, but it had fallen, not particularly Hershey's, but the whole I'm talking about that place as a whole had fallen apart. Sort of like Ward's Corner. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. That's not too far away. And it also had been a hub for small businesses and things like that. And it sort of died off and had been restored in the recent its process had begun right before the Sewell Point process began. And so I think there was a little bit of hope that, we were going to get all sorts of like fun, creative, interesting shopping or small businesses there.
I mean, this even made the national news, the Advocate, the Washington Post, in addition to our local press. And so it's about capitalism. It's not an excuse, right? But it shows the interconnections of capitalism, homophobia. And to be clear, I know there in some circles there was some questioning of, okay, was this just about money, or was it intentionally targeting queer groups?
Right.
I can't answer that, but I suspect it absolutely was a little of both. And I'm not at all suggesting that every individual city council member and the mayor, whoever, and other folks who were the voting bodies and decision-making bodies on that they're individually homophobic, but it's about a homophobic culture. And
absolutely.
And to pass this resolution for the sale to the city of this building in the 5 Points area of Norfolk without even recognizing, well, what was this place? Let's look at the history of it. Who are the people it serves? It shows the erasure of queerness, the unimportance of queer communities. So it's not about individual homophobia, but it's a collective homophobic culture or heteronormative culture that just kind of ignores and, or sometimes worse, erases queerness.
Absolutely.
All I have are my hunches.
Right.
And I can tell you that for what is there now, it's very disappointing to me to think about what we lost versus what we gained. And I don't think there's much happening there in terms of that park.
Yeah, because really, I think if any message was sent, it was that there was not a strong plan and they gave up in the middle. And maybe COVID had something to do with it. I don't know all the ins and outs. But there isn't a lot of reporting on it, I don't think. It's just sort of like they started tearing things down. There's a lot of buildings that are still abandoned. They built a park, and like if that was the plan, that was not much of a plan, and it didn't really add that much, I don't think.
It sent a really clear message. And this is something that I said in one of the times that I addressed Norfolk City Council. We went many times and talked to them during city council meetings. And one of the things I said was, your message is very clear. And the message that you're sending is this history and this place, and these people aren't important enough to you to stop the plans that you have in place. Other things that happened, people got married in the bar. There's actually an announcement in our own, the local gay and lesbian newspaper. And I want to say this was probably in the 90s, I think. But there's a little wedding announcement with the picture of these two women who got married in the bar. Yeah. And this was, before it was legally recognized or anything. There were memorial services that happened in the bar. That was one of the really difficult pieces for a lot of people when the bar was being forced to close, is that they had said really their last goodbyes to their friends and lovers and co-workers in that space. And it was very difficult for them to let go of the space because it had those connections to people who were no longer there. I talked to a few council members, Angela Graves and Mamie Johnson, about how to commemorate Hershee Bar.
Mhm.
And neither of them seemed particularly interested in talking to me about that. What I wanted was something to
Yeah.
say, lesbians have been here. And in fact, a few of us showed up that day just to kind of reiterate the fact that no one had forgotten about this, or at least we hadn't forgotten what happened, because this was several years later after the bar was closed. And I had a sign that said lesbian history was made here, because it was, because
Yeah.
any place that opens in 1983 and declares itself a lesbian bar, even though like it didn't say it on the outside and the windows were blacked over and stuff. I mean, those are things that you had to do to survive, both as a bar, a business, but also to like keep the people who were coming there safe.